On an April morning, the sun was shining softly on the identical rooftops of Seagrave Place, a quiet neighborhood where people greeted each other with smiles and walked their dogs through lush trees. The silence was not suspicious. It was routine. Number 742 looked the same, the curtains were drawn, the mailbox was empty, and the car was parked in the same spot. In a small town like Morrisville, near Raleigh, North Carolina, people believed that horrors happened elsewhere. Here, people loved the quiet, the uneventful days, but one small detail shattered that peace. Neighbors who passed by the house on the morning of April 14th sensed something was wrong. The strong smell of gasoline wafted from the crack in the door, an unpleasant warning. When they looked down into the crack in the floor, they saw a dark liquid, quietly seeping out, soaking the carpet inside. They called 911. And when the police broke down the door, the truth appeared like a wordless nightmare. Morrisville police entered the house on guard. They weren't expecting a murder until they opened the door to a small office at the end of the hall. On the floor, a woman's body lay motionless. Blood had dried beneath her head. She was clutching an urn containing the ashes of what appeared to be a pet. Beside her was a printed, unsigned note that was believed to be a suicide note. Not far away, a red gaskin sat near a window, intact. The man who identified himself as the husband, Michael Matthews, approached the police with a weary face and red eyes. He said they had decided to leave this world together. A double suicide, he insisted. And the wife, Nabaruna Karmakar, had shot herself, but what emerged told a different story. No trace of drugs. No gun marks on her hands. The bullet entered through the back of her head. And though the house was arranged as if for a farewell, everything was too clean, too neat, too intentional. The police began to suspect. And as they dug deeper, layers of pretense began to peel away, revealing a cold and ruthless plan. Nabaruna Karmakar, 31, was a talented engineer of Indian descent who lived and worked in North Carolina after earning her Ph.D. On April 14, 2023, she was found dead in her home, with 2 gunshot wounds, one in the back of her head and one in her forehead. Initially, her husband, Michael Matthews, claimed that this was a double suicide because they were grieving over the death of their beloved dog. But the investigation showed that all the evidence was against that statement. The bullet wound, the suicide note, the purchase of the gun, the purchase of gasoline, the time to call the police. The whole incident seemed to be elaborately staged, to hide a cold-blooded crime that had been planned in advance. How could a successful woman, who loved life, who was attached to her family, suddenly end her life in such a painful way? Who could be so heartless as to do it, and then stage a death play right in her own home? And why? What could make a person turn from love to murder, without anyone realizing it was coming? Let us uncover the mask of a case that was built as a love tragedy, but was actually a cold-blooded murder, where justice only came after tears, and the terrifying silence lasted too long. Nabaruna Karmakar, 31 years old, is the person everyone wants their daughter to become. Born and raised in Behala, a culturally rich neighborhood in Kolkata, India, she is the pride of her family, studious, gentle, introverted, and always upholding traditional values. Her parents, Mr. Tapan and Mrs. Cypra, once said that from a young age, Nabaruna was very independent and passionate about learning. Her passion for mathematics and science led her to Manipal University, one of the most prestigious private schools in India. After graduating, she received a full scholarship from North Carolina State University and left India for the U.S. to pursue a Ph.D. in industrial engineering. Despite being far from home, she still keeps in touch with her parents every day, sharing both work stories and simple meals, or pictures of her beloved dog Ralphie that she raises with her husband. Her life seemed complete when in 2019, she married an American named Michael Matthews. The wedding was held in Kolkata according to Hindu traditions. In the photos, Nabaruna smiles in a red sari, her eyes sparkle with happiness. After the wedding, she and her husband moved to Morrisville, near her workplace SAS Institute, a world-leading data analytics company. Nabaruna was loved by her colleagues, intelligent, neat, and always professional. However, since 2022, she has gradually withdrawn from community activities. She is often absent from traditional occasions, withdraws from old groups of friends, and often appears alone. When asked, she just smiles and says busy. But her eyes, according to a friend, no longer have the light like before. From the first moment the police entered the scene, Michael Matthews, the husband, gave his own explanation. The couple came to the final decision together because of the grief after the death of Ralphie. He said, Nabaruna no longer wanted to live. At first, no one suspected anything. Michael was a self-employed man, had little contact with neighbors, but had no criminal record, no signs of violence. But then, the police discovered some dark spots, the smell of gasoline in the room but no signs of fire. The suicide note was printed on a computer, not handwritten. There were no traces of anesthetic, but Nabaruna did not have any gunshot marks on her hand. At this point, there were still open hypotheses. Did Nabaruna really want to end her life, and Michael was just a witness? Could this have been an accident, or could there have been a third party involved? However, there was a twist. Security video from the Bass Pro Shop showed Michael buying a gun, ammo, gas cans, and zip ties just 24 hours before Nabaruna died. The credit card was his. The receipt was in the trunk. All the instruments of death were at the scene. The veil of lies began to fall apart. The office where the body was found seemed to have been staged deliberately. The carpet was neatly laid out. Nabaruna's body lay neatly, her head against the wall. Her arms were wrapped around the urn, as if she were embracing her last friend. A suicide note was lying nearby, but unsigned. It was a blank, emotionless piece of writing that did not fit the style of someone who wrote handwritten letters to their parents on the holidays. Another oddity, the gun, the one used to kill her, was lying 6 feet from her, on a bookshelf. There was no way she could have shot herself and put it on the shelf. In a storage room behind the house, police found fresh zip ties, tarps, and unused gasoline cans. It seemed a more elaborate plan had been devised and then changed at the last minute. This was not the place where someone wanted to die. This was the place where someone wanted to tell a false story. After the crime scene was sealed off, the investigation team began to decipher the details. They extracted the search history on Michael Matthews' computer and shuddered. In just 3 days before the incident, he searched for the following keywords: how to shoot someone and make it look like suicide, set up an explosion scene with gasoline, how to make a gun not leave traces on other people's hands. At the same time, a suicide note document was discovered on Michael's personal computer, not from any of Nabaruna's devices. The victim's last messages showed that she was still functioning normally, preparing a presentation, scheduling a call to her parents. Not a word about her intention to commit suicide. On the contrary, she texted friends, "I feel suffocated, everything can explode just because of silence." The little details came together to form the big picture. Michael planned to kill his wife, make the scene look like a suicide, and then call the police late so he had time to clean up. When the autopsy results came back, the bullet wound was angled from back to front. With no signs of close range, the police officially changed the investigation to homicide. On May 19, 2025, Michael Matthews admitted to the crime after a plea deal. He had killed his wife with a gun, creating a fake scene to Throw investigators off track, no apologies. No tears. Just a cold trial, and a sentence, 13 to 16 years for second-degree murder, but Waikia clues are found in personal notes. Michael was obsessed with control. Felt his wife was too independent, too smart, and didn't need him anymore. He had been unemployed, dependent, and jealous of Nabaruna's success. The dog's death was just the last straw and the pretext for a plan that had been brewing for a long time. It wasn't a crime committed in a moment of loss of control. It was a crime committed by someone who saw the light in another and wanted to extinguish it. On May 19, 2025, the Wake County Courthouse in North Carolina was packed. The media was not allowed to film the courtroom, but what happened inside still shook the community. Michael Matthews walked into the courtroom in a prison uniform, his face expressionless, no longer the caring husband in his wedding photo. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, after a deal with the prosecutor to avoid life in prison or the death penalty if convicted of first-degree murder. The sentence was announced, 13 years to 16 years and 5 months in prison. No probation. No appeal. Below, Mr. Tappan and Mrs. Cyprat, Nabaruna's parents, sat silently, not a single tear. Perhaps the tears had dried up after hundreds of sleepless nights. Dozens of transcontinental flights to follow every step of the investigation, and months standing in court, looking at the man who killed their daughter, but unable to touch him. They did not speak. They exchanged a trembling handshake. A message: we told the truth. It will not be buried. This trial cannot restore the life of a woman who lived with faith, compassion, and hope, Judge Keith Gregory said in his closing remarks. But it can acknowledge one thing: she was murdered. And now the world knows it. Since Nabaruna's death, 742, Seagrave Place has been abandoned. People passing by have stopped to look at her, their eyes filled with concern. The study room where she once sat reading papers and writing emails to students is now sealed. The blood has been wiped away, but the chill remains. The Karmakars did not return to India immediately after the trial. They chose to stay in the United States for a while, because their daughter's spirit is still here, not at rest. English, Bengali, and Hindi newspapers carried the news. Indian student groups in the U.S. held memorials. A room at SAS, where she worked, had a memorial, a photograph, some flowers, and a sentence in Bengali: "From the light, I came. To the light, I will return." A person died. But the community bore a wound of silence, of not recognizing the signs. A friend of hers wrote on Facebook, "If only we had paid more attention. If only someone had asked her a second time, a third time. If only someone had the courage to say, 'Are you okay? Or are you pretending to be okay?'" Nabaruna's case is a wake-up call to many issues that modern society tries to avoid: emotional violence in marriage, which doesn't leave a mark but wears people down day by day. Community silence, where everyone knows something is wrong but no one acts. Gun ownership is so easy that a murder can be carried out after just one trip to the supermarket, especially for immigrant women living far from home. Without a strong support system, isolation can easily become a deadly trap. Nabaruna didn't complain. She still worked hard, still called home every day. But after all, she still died in her own home, by the person everyone thought loved her the most. Statistics show that out of 10 murder cases involving women in the U.S., 6 were caused by their spouses or ex-lovers. But of those, less than 20% of the victims ever called for help. There are pains that are not expressed in tears, but in the silence of an entire house. If only one person had spoken up sooner, would the tragedy have happened? Nabaruna was loved. But sometimes, love is not enough to keep someone alive. Because loving the wrong person can be a death sentence.